Housing has always been such a hot topic for San Francisco residents, and that's because it's always been so freaking expensive. I moved to San Francisco right before I turned 21 and spent my 20s living between 4 various apartments, each with their own interesting living arrangements. I lived in a dorm, a studio, and 2 two-bedroom apartments, each with numerous roommates. So if you're in the market to find your next apartment in San Francisco, I hope this video might be helpful for you in navigating the cost, competitiveness, and the choice of where exactly to live. When I first moved to San Francisco back in 2012, I was a broke college student and didn't really know anything about the city. That's why the first place I decided to move into was the transfer student dorm building, which was located near downtown SF on top of California and Powell, where the famous San Francisco cable cars meet. This dorm was not your average college dorm. It was a 25-minute commute to the college campus, and this building was shared with a few other colleges in the area. Now, it's been a while, but from what I remember, the cost of my bedroom, which was shared with one other person, was about $1,100 to $1,200 each per month. This is for a room where I was living in the same room with someone else. We also shared a bathroom with 3 other rooms in a common area with everyone else on each floor. It was a dorm after all. Mind you, by the time I made it to SF, I'd already spent the past 2 years living in the college dorms at my previous university, also with a live-in roommate. At 21, it would have been nice to get my own space, but I didn't know anyone yet, and making the move cross-country as a student was already challenging enough, let alone finding housing. My rent was a part of my student cost of living, so in a way, it was nice that it was all handled together. Living near downtown was all right. Now that I've spent so much time in SF, I don't think I would want to live in that area ever again. The area tends to be packed with tourists, and it doesn't have the same charm that so many of the other neighborhoods have. At the time, I liked it because it was really central, and with so much public transportation running through that area, it made it really easy to go back and forth between various neighborhoods. I lived in this apartment building for about 1 year before moving into my second apartment. With this next apartment, I'll just cut to the chase. I ended up living with a guy I was not dating, sharing a bunk bed in a studio apartment in an area in San Francisco called the Tendernob. I have no words. It was so long ago, but from what I remember, finding this apartment was so extremely challenging that I was ready to do whatever it would take to find housing. There are a couple of reasons why this move was so hard for me. The first was cost. I did not have a lot of money at the time, and I was a college student after all, so I was trying to find the best housing which I could afford, and considering the last place I was staying at was over $1,000 a month, I was trying to find something under that cost. After scrambling to find housing before my previous lease was up, my friend and I landed this studio apartment, which costed us $960 each per month. The other big factor which made finding any apartment at this time challenging was that I was a student. Because as a student you don't have a steady income stream, you are a riskier bet for a landlord. Over and over I was getting turned down with the applications I was putting in until finally I befriended a property manager for an apartment complex who heard me out. My roommate and I were able to sign the lease to the studio with our parents as co-signers, and now I understand that this is pretty standard for students living in the city. The Tendernob area is sort of a made-up neighborhood, which is essentially a small area between the Tenderloin and Nob Hill. The Tenderloin is known to be a sketchier area of SF where there are lots of homeless people living, while Nob Hill is a much nicer area with great views of SF. I love the Nob Hill area, but I wouldn't really recommend anyone new to the city to live in the Tendernob area if they had a choice. In general, I felt safe where I was located, but I was always on alert and watching my back. The streets north towards Nob Hill were safer, but if I needed to go south, I would usually go like roundabout ways to get to places because I knew walking through the Tenderloin would be kind of sketchy. I think this area worked well for me back then because I had a similar commute to school and it was still central and easy to get around. I spent a lot of time in my early 20s going out at the Polk Street bar scene, which was right down the street from where I lived. It was super fun at the time, but that said, I'd be super careful if you decide to go out in this area. I've had 2 phones stolen there before, and it's sort of known now for people getting their stuff stolen, which totally sucks. And that brings me to my next apartment, which was the first 2-bedroom apartment I moved into with a couple of my college friends. I made the studio life work, but I was so excited to be done with it and move into a new place with some girlfriends. This would be the first time in 4 years I'd be getting my own bedroom since high school, and it was a dream. That said, we were still students and experienced similar challenges to the ones I had in finding my previous place. Even though I was set to graduate in about 6 months and had signed a contract for a job immediately after graduating, we still needed to get cosigners to land housing. During this time, we found housing to be so competitive that you had to pretty much get the first application submitted to land the spot. We each started bringing folders to the apartment viewings with all of the paperwork it typically takes to submit an application so we could try and land that first spot in the stack. I remember once we got the application in first, so we were on top, but out of nowhere, some girls below us bid higher on the place, so they got it instead. Like, so cutthroat. We eventually landed a place that we loved, not too far off from the 24th Street BART station in the Mission District, and moved in. For this 2-bedroom apartment, myself and one of the other girls got our own bedrooms while we turned half of the living room into a bedroom for the other. This apartment had a beautiful view of the city from the patio, which was unfortunately blocked off because my roommate's bedroom was there. We made it work though. We were still very much living on student budgets, so my roommate, who had a room, and myself each paid about $1,250 for our rooms, while our roommate, who lived in half of the living room, paid about $900. We also still needed to get cosigners for this apartment since we were all still students. So my dad and my roommate's dad signed onto the lease with us so we could rent it. After living in this apartment for about 2 years, I was somewhat forced to leave. It started because both of my roommates were just trying to leave SF for their next thing, but let me try to explain. There's basically 2 things at play here. One was the contract that myself, my 2 roommates, and 2 of our dads signed, and the second was being in a rent-controlled neighborhood in SF. So how these co-signed contracts work is that they lock all individuals signed to the contract with each co-signer. So my dad and my roommate's dad were co-signers for all 3 of us, independently. So when my roommates wanted to move out, that would have left one of their dads on the lease with me, which is ridiculous because why would her dad want to be deemed responsible for a random apartment in SF which his daughter no longer lives in or has ties to? So at this point, I asked the property owner if I could sign a new lease with just myself on it since I was now out of school and had a full-time job. But that wouldn't work either because we lived in this rent-controlled zone, and they said that they couldn't have me leave and sign a new contract because they would then want to increase the rent, and that's illegal in the area. So yeah, basically I was forced to leave. It was honestly so much better though. I found an apartment a few days later with an ex-boyfriend of mine and our friend, which was just down the street from the current place that I was living, and this new place had it all. It was a duplex, which meant there was only one other family living on property in the downstairs unit. It had a garage with a parking spot, a backyard, a patio, no clean laundry, and it allowed pets. These are all things which are typically so hard to find in a San Francisco apartment, but there it was. I remember we called the listing manager at like 9 p.m., like super late, when we saw the listing on Craigslist with the intention of leaving a voicemail, but he picked up. He said no one had seen the place yet and we could look first thing in the morning. So we made the appointment, got up, walked over, it was like a couple blocks away, and we were pretty sold on it. We put our applications in first thing that day and just locked it in. I don't believe anyone else saw the place because of how quick we were to rent it. And this is the place I lived in for the next 5 years. In San Francisco, unless you live in like one of those high sky-rise sort of apartments, you typically sign 1-year contracts which turn into month-to-month contracts afterwards. So I was living month to month in this apartment for a large majority of my time in SF, in a rent-controlled area and with a truly awesome landlord. The rent for this 2-bedroom apartment was $3,900 per month, and when I first moved in, I split the rent evenly 3 ways with the other 2 guys. At a certain point, my ex and I broke up, which put a huge burden on me to handle a lot more rent. I lived that way for a number of months before turning a small office room in the apartment into a bedroom and rented that out for about $800 a month. This is so typical of San Francisco, where you'll find lots of people turn odd rooms or spaces or like living rooms into bedrooms to try and make things work financially. Over the years, I moved in and out a number of roommates and shared so many amazing memories from that time. And then last year, during 2020, when there was all the craziness going on with the pandemic, my landlord called me one day and told me that he was actually going to decrease the rent for my apartment because he enjoyed having me so much as a tenant. I was super communicative with him all the time whenever I was moving in a new roommate and they had a new pet or whatever it was. And he wanted to keep the apartment competitive for the market. So that was pretty cool. I never had my rent decrease before. It was definitely unique circumstances, but that did happen. Which actually now brings me to the current moment. I'm actually not filming this video in San Francisco since I've recently moved and bought a house with my boyfriend in San Diego. I still can't even believe I've gotten to this point from living on a bunk bed to now owning a 3-bedroom house right off the beach. I loved my time in SF though, and I truly have made it through the craziness that comes with renting apartments there. I'll end this video with a couple other suggestions of places I think are good for renting apartments in SF if you are trying to figure out where exactly to live right now. I loved living in the Mission because it does have more of a neighborly feel. If you find a place near Dolores Park, I would definitely lock that in. Noe Valley is really similar as far as it feels really neighborly, and it's just in general really nice. It also has the best dog park nearby. It's called Upper Douglas Dog Park. The Hay, Coal Valley, and the Panhandle are also all great areas which are near to Golden Gate Park. I've always loved Pack Heights because it has lots of cute restaurants and shops, but this area starts to get further away from downtown, so if you do need to commute into the city to work, or like into the downtown area to work, this can start to feel sort of far. The same goes for Russian Hill and the Marina, both beautiful areas with lots of fun places to eat and hang out, but to me it's always felt a bit far to commute into the city every day for work. I no longer live in SF, but I still have so much knowledge of what it's like living there, so if you're watching this video and have any questions about where to live or about how to rent an apartment out there, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you with some more answers, or maybe I'll make another video like this. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you like me and my videos, I'd love for you to be a subscriber. Typically on this channel, I make videos about design, careers in tech, life in San Francisco, life in San Diego, you know. Anyway, I hope to see you in the next video. That is all for now though. Bye.